Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, finance, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian, independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend, Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about Uber's fatal self-driving crash, Myer getting slaughtered, and some delicious slow-cooked pork. But before all that, we have a little bit of follow-up around the Ataribox, or now what it will be called, the Atari VCS. Did you hear about this, Alex? Before I
did. I did. But the first thing that struck me was Ataribox is a much more memorable name than an Atari VCS.
It does have a bit more of a ring to it than just sort of a random acronym, but that's what it seems like they're going with. So as listeners may recall, we mentioned that they were meant to go on pre-order towards the end of last year, but the company delayed the release to, quote, create the platform and ecosystem the Atari community deserves, end quote. So now they're saying the new pre-order date will be announced in April. That's not saying that it will go on pre-order in April, just they'll say what the hell is actually going on in April. It'll cost between $250 and $300. I don't know if we already knew that detail or not. And as the speculation was growing, it will run a certain amount of PC games, but it won't run Windows. So it'll be interesting to see, sort of the power that it has behind it and what titles will actually be available for it. But I suppose it's like SteamOS, right? There is a lot of games that run on Linux these days because it will have a Linux-based OS. So it could be interesting. Are you any more sort of taken with this idea, Alex? Or still pretty skeptical?
Well, yeah, I seem to recall being quite skeptical last time we spoke about it, although it was a while ago. And then, we just kind of sat on the news for a bit, and now they've kind of released this. I don't think that for me, a console like this has a whole lot of value because, which basic video games are you going to be playing? I suppose is a question. And B, what kind of custom titles are going to be coming with the console itself?
I suppose only the old school ones that you can kind of get emulators and all that for now anyway. But, Nintendo had huge success releasing their little mini versions of, like, the Super Nintendo and all that, didn't they? So I guess... Yeah. If that has all those exclusive games from back in the day, and it's only $250, which still, like, you can get an Xbox for that price, so it's not cheap. But if you have that and you have the nostalgia and you have the ability to play an amount of sort of today's best games, then it could have some appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, I think that if you're an Atari fan back in the day, then of course, it's going to be something very special to you.
And it certainly has the look, like sitting there on your cabinet with the wooden panels and all that. Yeah.
I can see it. Not for me, though. Definitely not for me.
No, well, I never played that. That was before my time.
Yeah, look, I think that if I were to get one, it wouldn't get played because I have a limited amount of time to play games anyway, so... When I do, I'd probably be wanting to play games that I enjoy. And
yes, it's not like your Xbox gets much of a workout anyway.
No, that's true.
Did you see Uber's self-driving car crashed or hit a woman, I think? Yes, a female pedestrian and killed them?
Yes, I did. I don't know the situation around it, though. Was it to avoid a more kind of... costly accident? Was that the reason why the car hit her? I don't know.
This was in Arizona. The car doesn't seem to have slowed down or taken any sort of evasive action. As with most of these tests, there was someone in the vehicle that was meant to, I guess, really step in and take control in situations like this. So I guess they were a bit asleep at the wheel too. I don't know. The details are fuzzy. It may be that the woman just kind of started crossing the road and didn't look. Like, the pedestrian could have been completely in the wrong. We don't know yet. But we know that the car didn't attempt to take any sort of evasive action, and nor did the, not driver, but the minder sitting in the vehicle. Regardless of what the outcome is, it does probably set this sort of stuff back a little bit. And Uber, of course, have suspended their testing program indefinitely on the back of this, which is probably sensible.
Well, yeah, they have to do it. I mean, I'm sure that they were somewhat prepared for this kind of event, though. I would imagine, at least.
Well, yeah, it's always a risk, and they've got all the right permits and things in place, but
I would, yeah. I mean, it seems to me unlikely that it was a fault with the car. And what kind of control do the drivers have? Can they just completely take over control of the car if they need to at any point?
I think they can, but yeah, of course, what everyone says with this sort of thing, which is probably true for these testing people as well, if you have a car that's doing the right thing and driving itself 99.999% of the time, it's very hard to stay that focused.
Oh, of course.
You know, for like that whole time, and then just be prepared to take over at a moment's notice. So it was probably all happened very quickly, I imagine.
Yeah.
Because if there was a lot of lead up, then it wouldn't have happened because the person would have taken over. But
do you know what I kind of think? I mean, I suppose they have training for this kind of thing, but if you're sitting behind a car that's driving itself, so the pedals, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the pedals still go in and out and the wheel still turns, right? That's how self-driving cars work?
I imagine so. Like each one, well, there have been some like from Google where they like completely get rid of the manual controls, but in this case, and in a lot of cases, they'll take an existing car that exists out there in the world from whichever manufacturer, and then they'll retrofit all the sensors and smarts into it. And usually, especially if it's designed for real world testing, they'll have all the pedals and the steering wheel and all the manual controls still fully available to the minder in the car.
So they're available and they work as well.
Yeah, they'll override whatever the computer's trying to do with them.
Right, okay. So this lady's sitting there and the steering wheel, you know, while the car's driving itself, the steering wheel is still turning in front of her, the pedals are still pushing themselves down. So she can't kind of sit there and be holding on to the steering wheel. She's sitting there probably with her hands by her side and her feet away from the pedals.
Yep, probably.
I mean, obviously, I assume they've kind of thought of this kind of thing, but how do you react quickly in that kind of situation? Because you have to actually then get your hand on the steering wheel. What's going to make it even more difficult is, you know, if the steering wheel is if the car's driving straight forward and the steering wheel is in kind of, you know, the set position, the kind of default position when the wheels are straight, that's easy. But what if you're trying to grab the steering wheel while it's turned 90 degrees? That just adds an extra amount of time to you actually preparing yourself in that position. So I think it would be difficult to react to something that has probably, as you said, happened in a split second for the driver in this particular driverless car.
Yes. So that woman before, I mentioned that she was the victim, not the driver. I don't know who the driver was.
Yeah. Oh, it's said in the news article that it was a woman driving.
Oh, okay. There was also some speculation earlier on that the victim was a cyclist, but that's apparently not true. She was just on foot.
Well, I mean, it's useless speculating now, isn't it, really?
Yes, they'll have to do a thorough investigation and we shall see what the outcome is. I mean, I suppose one, well, not good thing necessarily, but because of the amount of cameras and sensors all over this vehicle, even if it did nothing to react to the potential danger, it's probably all captured. So it's probably going to be quite clear who was in the wrong and who was in the right and what should have happened in that situation.
Yes. Yeah, no, you're right. Have you, just as a sort of side note, but fairly related, have you heard of people in China jumping out in front of cars in order to get large payouts from rich owners? So to do this, they'll only jump out in front of very rich-looking cars, so, you know, BMWs, Mercedes, whatever. But they'll try and then get injured by these people because I don't exactly understand how it works, but in China, you have the responsibility to pay for the medical fees and then, you know, potentially other costs associated with, you know, hitting or injuring somebody. So there's no kind of state care for these people. It has to be covered by the individual who causes the particular incident or injury or whatever. So people jump out in front of these cars with the hope of getting injured by rich people who can then afford to pay them large amounts of money. And obviously this would then put an end to that kind of thing, wouldn't it?
You would think so. And that's also, I suppose, the reason in the huge uptick in those dash cams.
Yeah. There's a lot of videos out there, actually, of people jumping in front of cars with dash cams on and trying to get themselves run over.
Which is obviously just stupidity, and I hope is not covered under the Chinese legislation.
Well, I think the hope is that they're so rich that they can actually cover this kind of thing without taking it to the authorities and going through all the hoo-ha of that and just throwing some money at the problem. Because, I mean, reasonably speaking, there would be a lot of witnesses to somebody jumping out in front of a car in the middle of a busy freeway, which is what you see on video a lot of times from these dash cams, where people actually just jumping in front of the cars and trying to get themselves squished, surrounded by pedestrians.
Don't know if it's the best way to make a buck, but
that's true.
I suppose when you don't have much, it's
there's a lot
tempting.
of desperation behind that kind of decision, isn't there?
Alrighty, Commerce Corner time.
Yes.
I saw, well, this is not probably news to anyone, but you even mentioned this the other day, Myers being slaughtered, their stock price, because they announced a almost $500 million first half loss this year, which that is pretty sizable. How long do you think they're going to be able to keep limping along if something doesn't drastically change?
Well, I mean, I think I've kind of talked about this before, how department stores like Myers just aren't a feasible business model anymore, which is sad for them, really.
Why is Myers in particular, though, doing so badly?
I think it's just the way they operate. So they have so they're a luxury kind of retailer, but they're a luxury retailer on a very large scale. And I don't know how much of their business they do online, but I don't think they do much of it online. So it's all the sales they get tend to be from their shops. And they have in Australia, they have the big locations in the big cities, but they rely on, I think, a large volume of people coming through their stores and buying a lot. And I know that certainly if I go to Myers, I might go to Myers just to suss out the prices there, but then I'll go online and probably buy my stuff online because I know it's going to be cheaper than buying from Myers. And I think a lot of people do the same thing.
Yeah, they're really just a big showroom.
Yeah, exactly. And you go there for nice brands, so I go there to try out cologne, but then I'll go online and try and find the cologne cheaper.
Which you almost certainly will.
Well, exactly, yeah. And if you look at their stores, they have a lot of people on their floors.
They do. They have a power of employees. Although most of those, I think, are subcontracted out to the various cosmetic brands and fashion brands, are they not?
I don't know.
Or at least there's some sort of split happening there.
Yeah. Because
you go into Myers these days in the clothing section or cosmetics, and everything is broken into brands. And all those employees that are manning those particular booths have all the branding of that particular brand on them. So I don't know if they directly work for Myers.
Yeah. Look, I know the other thing with Myers is they own Topman or Topshop or something.
Topman, Topshop.
Yeah, whatever that one's called. It's
another clothing retailer.
But basically, they're going to have to shut down that entire business. So they bought them in 2011 or something like that, and with the intention of trying to build another brand, like another Myers type brand. And the company's completely tanked. So that's when they say they've had a $515 million impairment, I think that's writing down the cost of Topman because they're just not making money from those stores.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe things aren't that bad if that's mostly where their losses come. If they get rid of that, then they'll be profitable again, presumably in the second half. Albeit
I don't think Myers stores are profitable though. And also as well, they've another reason why the share price is dropping is they've cancelled their dividends. So a lot of investors look for growth in their shares, but some, especially if you're buying an established brand like Myers, you'd expect to be getting a good dividend from your share, just because they're established and they're supposed to be making decent profit and they're supposed to have a strong book. But Myer, I think, have a lot of debt. Their share price has dropped a lot, and they're not selling the way they used to. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the end of Myers in a few years.
And David Jones.
And well, yeah, they go hand. They're owned by the same company, aren't they?
Are they? I didn't realise that. It seems very stupid if they are, given, well, at least they're set up in Melbourne with the two main stores like directly opposite each other, and then stocking like the same things in both.
Well, I mean, that's the idea, isn't it? They just kind of create their own competition.
I suppose. A lot of retail space there, and if they're, losing money, I'd shut one and then only keep the other one open. But anyway, I'm not in charge.
No. Well,
if things were going great, I could understand it, but yeah.
But it depends. I don't know how they're listed exactly, because it might depend on how they're listed. Because if they're listed as two separate companies, they may have the same ownership, but each company still has its own interests, so you can't really be using one to further the interest of the other.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. I didn't realise they were all part of the same group.
They may not be. That's just, I don't know where I got that idea from. They're basically the same company, though, right? I mean,
well, yeah, they basically are. Parent company Woolworths Holding Limited.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, they're not owned by the same company then.
Owned by the juggernaut Woolworths. So they might still keep getting propped up for a while yet.
Well,
maybe that's their plan. Try to wait for Myers to die off, and then they'll be the only one, and then they might be able to scrape through and make a bit of a profit. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult place to sit in right now. And as I said, I don't think they've gotten much into the online selling at all, which is really where the future is. It's stupid that they haven't, but well, it's there. They do offer it, but it's not the best service.
Yeah,
and their website again is pretty lackluster.
Yeah, you're right.
And these things aren't hard. I know I say the same thing every time, but it's not a hard thing to do. It's like when they're losing $500 million, chuck, I don't know, 50 grand at it, you'll improve it vastly. I don't understand.
Of course.
Anyway, they're just acting as a showroom for the time being.
Now, I actually noticed something that I did want to share on this, because this is something that's really interested me, and this is the same kind of information that, I guess, like, this is the same type of thing that sank the share market in 2008. So basically, I have shared an article with you about the...
is this the Russell 2000?
The Russell 2000, the average PE ratio in the Russell 2000.
What is the Russell 2000?
So the Russell 2000 is the top 2,000 companies in the US stock market.
Ah, okay.
And the PE ratio, to explain it very basically, with my very basic knowledge, is the price to earnings ratio. So basically it's how much earnings you get out of each share that you buy from a company. And it's a percentage figure. So say I'm getting 10 cents for every share that I own, and each share is worth $2. The EPS would be 5%, I think. Is that correct? 5%.
It sounds right to me.
Yeah, 5%. So that would make the PE ratio, the price of the share, divided by the earnings per share, which is 5%, which equals...
I should pick slightly easier enough.
Do the math. Yeah. Hang on, let's just make it 20 cents. So it's 10. So then it's 20. So it should make the PE ratio 10, basically. Should give you that round figure 10. So PE ratio, it's not, like, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot, generally speaking. It tells you something. It tells you basically if the share price stays exactly the same as it is and the company keeps paying out dividends of exactly the same amount that they were paying out previously, tells you how long it would take for you to get the amount you put into the share back in dividends alone, right?
Okay.
So it's a somewhat useful metric when you're looking at buying shares purely for income purposes, and it kind of becomes a lot more relevant in shares in really established companies or in like utilities companies that don't really have a fluctuating share price that much. They might be going up, they won't go up a whole lot, and they're fairly stable and fairly established. So basically nothing's going to happen to them. You would assume their dividend's going to remain about the same. So it just kind of gives you that idea of what to expect from the company, purely in terms of earnings, though. But it is a useful thing to see where the market is in general, because if you look at things like tech stocks, which are almost exclusively growth stocks, right? Which means that they don't pay much in terms of dividends. They do pay dividends, but they don't tend to pay out a lot of their profit in dividends, because they're using those profits to reinvest in the company and to grow the company, which will then, the majority of the time, mean the share price will rise. So your profit technically, or usually, that you get from these particular companies is more in terms of a rising share price than in terms of the dividends or income you get paid out from the company.
Okay.
And generally speaking, for indexes as a whole, like the ASX 200 is an index, and the PE ratio, I don't know what the PE ratio is, but it's probably between 20 to 25. But it's really easy to look up, ASX 200 PE ratio, and it's just the average PE ratio across all of the stocks in the index itself. And it just kind of gives you an idea of how much people are paying for particular shares, and also gives you an idea of where the market is in general.
Yeah.
So why this is relevant for this particular subject, though, is that in the article that I've shared with you, the Russell 2000 index is just, as I said, the top 2,000 companies in the world, and they have been reporting their PE ratio, their average PE ratio for the index, as about 22.6, right? Which means that if you were to buy, an average weighting of each share on the total index, your average PE ratio across everything would be 22.6, which means that if all the companies, their share prices all stayed exactly the same, they paid out exactly the same dividends, then you would be getting your money back in 22.6 years, or the amount that you'd put in there.
Okay.
On dividends alone.
Right. So that's not as good as the normal average, even though these are the top best companies?
No, that's about the same. That's what you'd expect in a market that's growing.
Okay.
Probably between 20 to 30 is a fairly healthy ratio, PE ratio, for all the companies, because growth companies, as I said, usually have a larger PE ratio just because they don't pay out very high dividends.
Yeah, okay.
But that's then usually balanced by the utilities and the bigger companies that pay out higher dividends but don't expect as much growth in the share price. So generally speaking, the PE ratio, it goes up and down. It usually, really the fluctuation you'll see it'll be between maybe 15 to probably about 30 to perhaps 35 if the market is really excited. But if it starts to get higher, it means that people are paying a lot just to buy a share because they expect very high growth. So the reason this is relevant is that, as I said, they've been reporting their PE ratio as 22.6. But what they've been doing is they haven't been taking into account shares or stocks or companies rather that are actually losing money. And the reason for this is you can't actually calculate a PE ratio, or you get a very high, and it's kind of a skewed figure, PE ratio, if you're looking at a company that's losing money, because you don't have that positive figure to start your earnings with. And because they're not paying out dividends, you get kind of a negative PE ratio, and it doesn't really work for these type of calculations, but they are still relevant, obviously, because it gives you an idea of how much people are paying for stocks. So if you take into account these companies that are losing money, which is about 10% of the total index, or the total 2,000 companies, about 200 of those are losing money on the Russell 2000, the PE ratio actually jumps up to 89.2.
Right.
Which is a lot higher. And those are the kind of, when you have an average PE ratio of anywhere above 50, it means that you're paying a lot for a company. Some people are willing to do that. Amazon, I think, usually runs at a PE ratio of 80 or something, or it has in the past. And that still made a lot of money. So that's been a wonderful investment if you bought Amazon. But just generally speaking, when you have a whole index that's running that high, it means that probably people are a bit too excited about the shares in the index, and they're probably paying a lot for them. And it probably means that everything's a bit expensive at the moment. But it's relevant because it's not actually been reported on. I mean, obviously some private company has kind of discovered this and it's been published in the news. But it's just weird that the index itself doesn't actually acknowledge that, and people have to go out and do their own research.
So what is this again, the Russell 2000? Is it across all stock markets in the US? Because there's two main ones, isn't there? Or am I getting confused?
So they're not actually stock markets. They're indexes, I think is what you're referring to.
Right.
So there are exchanges that shares trade on, but the Russell 2000 isn't an index. Isn't like an exchange that the shares are trading on. It's an index. So all it does is it looks at the top 2,000 companies by market cap in the US.
It's just a listing service.
It's just a listing service. So it gives people a general idea of the companies in the US at the moment, who those companies are, what their market cap is, and then it just puts them all into a particular index. And then out of that index, it draws particular statistics. And it also looks at the average kind of gains or losses across its index as well. So it may say that the total market cap for the Russell 2000 went up by 1% yesterday. And then people just look at that and they just basically get an idea of how the market's going based on those figures. Okay,
but because they're not holding the shares themselves, then it's not like they're really deliberately misleading anyone. It's more they think that the way they do their calculation is more helpful than taking that into account.
Well,
which you wouldn't think so, but...
Yes and no, but I mean, when you provide a service, like these indexing services are very important because they basically, if they're getting their figures wrong, then they're providing incorrect information, which the market very strongly relies on.
Mm.
I mean, am I saying that, like, it doesn't really kind of have anything to do with them?
Sure, it'll impact the market, but it's not like they're manipulating the market. Unless they are. Behind the scenes, like buying and selling, but...
Actually, you know what? I've completely got this index wrong. It's not the top 2,000 companies in the... Sorry, my bad. It's not the top 2,000 companies in the US. It's a small cap stock index. So basically, it's from the small cap stocks, which is the lower stocks in the market. It's the bottom 2,000 of those.
Oh, so it's like the worst performing ones.
No, just the smallest ones. So the ones that have the smallest market value.
Right. So like the startup companies, kind of.
Well, potentially startup companies, yeah.
Or just really low volume ones.
Yeah. And just don't have much business to kind of get around with.
So yes, that is quite different.
It is very different, yeah. But it's still quite relevant because it would still make up quite a large portion of the market.
It would, yeah.
But it still kind of gets onto my larger point, which is the fact that we rely on these figures provided by these indexes and, you know, also the figures provided by these brokering companies. You know, they kind of do these calculations and a lot of people rely on them. But the data isn't actually always true or relevant or, you know, based on the things that we think it's based on.
Yes, you've got to be careful, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, now you know about this, you can use it to your full advantage.
I don't know what I'm going to do with it, though, to be honest.
So what's your roast for today, Alex?
Well, actually, today's going to be a double roast. Right now, I have a roast pork sitting in the oven.
Why double roast? Just for added challenge, because you're getting far too good at it?
Not quite. I wish. No. It's because I've been wanting to do a slow cooked roast pork for so long now, and I haven't kind of figured out the perfect formula for it. And I think it's just because I haven't been giving it enough time in the oven. And also on my last one, I didn't seal the roast properly, so it got quite dry. So right now, I'm probably going to be leaving this bit of pork in the oven for maybe 4 to 5 hours, and then I'm going to be taking it out, taking the foil off, and then chucking it in the oven for maybe another half an hour or so. And then after that, I'm just trying to get a piece of pork that falls apart when you touch it. I don't even know if that's possible, but I think it is. You can slow cook pork, right?
Pretty sure that's a thing. Yeah, they do slow cook pork. Yeah, all sorts of things. Like, and then that just sort of shreds up really easily, and then they put it on things. Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
It is, yeah. So there you go. That's my plan.
And what's the other one?
The other one is going to be a slow cooked lamb. I'm all about slow cooking today.
Can your oven fit two at the same time?
Should be able to, actually, yeah. But I was actually thinking of just finishing because the pork's been in since about 8:30 this morning. So I was thinking of finishing the pork and then heading straight on to the lamb after that. Because the lamb needs about 4 hours. So the pork should be done by maybe about 2:30.
Is it for the same meal, or do you eat it like during the week?
Well, no, this is for during the week. So,
Okay.
yeah. It's going to be a lot of meat, but I'm ready.
Your body's prepared.
I'm prepared, yes.
What else have you cooked in recent times?
I did a really good bolognese the other day, actually. I'd say it was my one of my crowning bolognese pieces, actually. So I did. I just used my regular pasta recipe, which I've become quite good at as well. So I do a base of. I don't like celery, so I do the classic base of onion, carrot. But instead of celery, I do zucchini, and then I just kind of saute that, and then just chuck some pre-cooked meat on top of it, just some mincemeat and a whole bunch of herbs, and then let it sit in that for maybe an hour or so, and then I add a jar of pre-made tomato sauce, pasta tomato sauce. I know that some people say that it's cheating or anything, but I never really had a problem with it. It's a lot easier than trying to flavour your own tomato sauce.
Mm.
And then that's it. That's all you need to do. Super easy.
Yeah, bolognese is pretty easy.
You can chop up little bits of bacon and chuck that in there as well.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. You just got to have time.
Why do you let it sit for so long, though? What does that do?
I think it just...
I never do that with mine.
Well, it just helps bring out the flavour of the vegetables and just make sure the vegetables are all kind of cooked. Because I find that sometimes if you sit there and saute them, like they don't properly soften up. So especially because I do 2 zucchinis, a couple of carrots, and like an onion or 2 onions.
Yeah, the carrot's always tricky.
Yeah.
But what I do with that usually is I cheat a bit and I steam them for like 10-15 minutes beforehand.
Ah, okay.
Mm.
Well, but then don't you find that like you kind of lose some of the flavour if it's... Because I like it to be a little bit hard when it's going into the sauce, so that then when it's softening up, it's just releasing the flavour into the sauce.
Yeah, no, yours is probably the better way, but mine's quicker, so...
Yeah. Yeah, look, don't get me wrong, I love quick recipes, but I find that when it comes to sauces and stuff like that, if you want the meat to be nice and soft as well, you've got to give it a good amount of time in the juice to kind of soften up. So I find that, like, you'll know if a bolognese has, not necessarily because it tastes worse, but you'll know if a bolognese hasn't been cooked for as long because the minced beef or the minced meat, whatever meat you use, sticks together a lot better.
Mm.
Whereas if it's been slow cooked for a while, then you'll kind of get that meat that's falling apart a lot more.
Yeah, that is true. That makes sense.
But at the same time, there's no hugely compelling reason why you can't be cooking a nice bolognese sauce in half an hour, 45 minutes.
Mm.
And aside from that, I did a Guinness stew on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very festive.
So it was festive, yeah. And I'm actually going to try that again.
Did it turn out well?
It turned out really well, yeah. So I have my stew recipe as well, which is basically what you do is chop up your stew meat, or buy it pre-chopped or whatever, and then put it in a like a little sandwich bag with flour, salt, pepper, paprika, and a bit of thyme. And I think I've forgotten a herb, but that's the gist of it basically. And then you kind of shuffle it all up, make sure that the meat's covered in flour, and then you just gently fry that to just get it a bit brown on the outside, and then chuck it in a pot with some stock mixture. I used Guinness instead of stock last time because Guinness stew, and some tomato paste, and I think that's actually it. Oh, and a couple of bay leaves, and then you just leave it there. I actually slow cook mine again because I love slow cooking stuff because it gets the meat nice and soft. So I actually get it to the boil on the stovetop, and then I chuck it in the oven at pretty low heat, maybe like 100 or 90 degrees in fan forced, and I just leave it there for maybe about 2 hours or so. And then you should, like, when you open it up, all the meat should be kind of nice and soft, and then you chuck your veggies in. So I think put carrot and potato in with it, and then you mix it all together, make sure the potato and carrot are all kind of Like, there shouldn't be a lot of mixture, a lot of water in the mixture, but there should be like a little bit of liquid. So then the potato and carrot kind of have something to soak up, and then chuck it back in the oven for maybe an extra hour, and then you're done. But that gets a really thick stew. If you want a more stewy stew, just add more liquid, and then it'll kind of be
Stewy stew.
more stewy, I guess. But I'm going to try and make that into the base of a pie.
Oh yeah, that would be nice.
So pie meat, yeah. That's my plan.
Have you done many pies or pastry-orientated dishes?
Well, that's my plan for today, and it's actually my first pie I've ever done. So I'll let you know how it goes. I'll take some pictures.
Yes, please do. Okay, so for a new segment now, the Linguistic Slice.
Ooh, yes.
So I was just looking up a few etymology, origin of a few words and phrases the other day, and I just thought that I would mention them because I find this stuff quite interesting. I don't know whether you do.
I do. I like the origins and where our language comes from.
So I assume you've heard all of these phrases and terms, but stop me if you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
From soup to nuts.
No.
You haven't heard that?
I have not.
It means from one thing to another, or from like A to Z, like a complete collection of something. From soup to nuts, essentially.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Definitely not.
Oh, okay. Well, that arose fairly early on, although we're not sure when, probably the start of the 1900s or late 1800s, where quite often if you would have a many-course meal, you would start with soup and oftentimes end with nuts. And so, hence, from soup to nuts came about.
Okay, I see. Soup to... Okay, why would nuts be at the end? I suppose because they didn't have like ice cream to finish off your meals with.
Well, that we're not really sure about. Sometimes they would have other sweeter things, but quite often it would be nuts. Because like you say, yeah, they didn't have some of the many sweet dishes that we have today.
Okay. I like it.
There's a pork chop in every beer.
Again, I haven't heard it.
You haven't heard that one? That one is quite recent. So, for example, if a bartender said to you after ordering a drink and you said, and they asked you whether you wanted to see a menu, you could say, no thanks, there's a pork chop in every beer. Basically alluding to the fact that the calories within a beer are roughly equivalent to one pork chop. Roughly. Of course, the nutritional value is completely different, being a pork chop has mostly protein, and beer is sort of carbohydrates and alcohol.
Yes.
But calorie-wise, roughly equivalent, which is where the term came from, and is still in, well, not very common usage, but apparently you hear it every now and again. I haven't actually heard that one in real life, but
okay.
Yeah, I saw that pop up.
Another kind of alternative to that, I know that we're discussing facts and alternatives, but the way I understood it at first was, have you ever heard of someone being referred to as a pork chop, as in being a bit silly?
Yes.
And drinking beer is, a bit silly, just by definition, because you pay money for it and, it doesn't improve your life in any real way. So, and people say that you're, like, in your beers, as in you're having drinks. So that was kind of my initial understanding of what that phrase meant.
Right, yeah, that kind of works as well. Double meaning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, single real meaning and possible alternative.
Yes.
False meaning.
Have you heard of sort of the, I don't know what you call this, it's kind of a prefix but not right, sort of like a qualifier, I guess, stone cold?
Yes.
Like stone cold sober?
Yes.
So how would you understand that to mean if I said stone cold sober? Like what's the stone cold in that phrase actually conveying?
Okay, well, that's actually very interesting because I have heard the phrase, but my understanding of it was more around just being very sober. And so being sober is kind of being sensible. So it's just, in my mind, being very sensible and sober.
Yes. So mostly, although this sort of changes between how it's used, but mostly it sort of means completely. So completely sober.
Okay.
Is this stone cold sort of variant. But there's other things that are referred to as stone something, like stone blind, which is like completely blind.
Yes.
So where do you think stone or stone cold, sort of how that became to mean completely?
Stone cold. Okay, well, okay, so stone is obviously something that's very hard and unyielding, and perhaps in older times when houses were made of stone, I don't know. Yeah, I've got nothing.
Well, I was going to say you weren't too far off the mark, but you probably were a little bit. So back in even as far back as the late 1600s, there's reference to stone cold. And in those times, it was really only used in sort of one particular case, which was describing the condition of a corpse being stone cold or very, very cold. And so, obviously, when you're dead, that's kind of your final state. So it sort of became finally or completely, and then was used in front of many things.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one, actually. I like that. And it's one I've heard of as well.
Yes. And this other one you've probably heard of. Lastly, footing the bill.
Yes.
Meaning to pay the bill. Where do you think that came from?
Oh, okay. All right. So give me a couple of guesses here because I've got a few.
Okay.
So my first one is in kind of older times, there was the position of the footman.
Mm.
And perhaps it had something to do with having your footman, like presenting your... no, okay. Wait, I got this. So making sure that your footman... Okay, so people wouldn't have paid for their own stuff back in the olden days. They perhaps would have had servants to do it if you were rich. So maybe you had your footman go and pay the bill, something like that. Or if it's not that, kind of that one lost a bit of momentum because it didn't really make sense by the end.
It's not that, but I like it.
Footing the bill. Okay, no, I thought it might have something to do with the dance or something like that, but no, I've got nothing.
Okay, so footing back in like the late 1500s, early 1600s, was quite often used in accounting to mean the act of adding up figures in a list and placing a total at the foot of the column. So when someone asked you to foot the bill, it was kind of a euphemism for pay the bill, but a polite way of saying, can you check over this, make sure it's right, and also pay? And so that original context fell away, and now it just means to pay the bill.
Well, that's another good one. I like that one. I think that I tend to like the ones more that I've heard of.
Yes. But now you might go around saying some soup to nuts.
Maybe I will. Perhaps I will.
New phrase. It's possible. Bring it back. Bring it back into common usage. Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes for more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/36. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
Been playing a bit of Fortnite, Alex, on the Xbox.
Yes, David, I have. And I'm not very good. Most of my losses have been quite absolute and very near to the start of the game. But on my first playthrough on Xbox One, I actually got third place.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It's all right.
For those that aren't aware, that Fortnite is one of these other games like PUBG that is a battle royale style game where each individual teams get dropped into a map and it's basically a fight to the death, last person standing type arrangement. So coming third, I think there's 100 that are in Fortnite.
100 people? Yep.
Yeah. So out of 100 you came third, which is pretty damn good.
For a first game, yeah. But do you know how I did it?
Hiding?
Yeah, no, I ended up in a place where nobody else was, and I kind of figured out the dynamics of the game pretty quickly, but nobody else dropped into my landing site. So I looked around, I got all the weapons from the landing site, I was doing pretty well, and I kind of, I followed the storm in, more, and until I didn't see anybody until I think I saw one person when I was in like 5th place. So there were 5 people left, and that was the first person that I saw. And then, 2 more people died, and I was kind of hiding, and and then I got killed, and I was in 3rd place because someone shot me.
That's pretty lucky. How'd you go the rest of the time? How many games did you play?
I played a few, so I ended up in like 80th place several times in a row. Actually, no, I got another 3rd place. I got another 3rd place on my very last game, but that was another situation where I didn't see anybody throughout the entire game.
So luck and not so much skill based.
Oh, definitely luck based, yeah. But I got 3rd place because there were still about 8 people left, and I got killed by a team of people, which I'm beginning to appreciate is
how you should play the game.
Like, it's better to play as a team. Yeah.
It is free, isn't it?
It is free, yeah. And I think you said you can play across platforms. I noticed that when I was searching, I'm only searching for other Xbox One players, so I don't know how to change that in the settings, but...
Yeah, I think it's slightly complicated. Also, it's weird, because they're bringing out mobile versions of the game now. It's on iOS, but you need an invite, and it will soon be on Android. And so you'll be able to play with everyone, except... you can't play with PS4 and Xbox. As in, you could have everyone on every different thing. You could have someone on a computer and on a phone, and then you could have someone on Xbox, and that would be fine. Or you could have someone computer, phone, PlayStation, fine. But you can't have a group that consists of someone with a PlayStation and an Xbox. Not because Microsoft care, they don't. But Sony don't want you to be able to play with other Xbox people.
Okay.
And there's restrictions within their like terms of service and all this, which means the developers have to go through these hoops of like making sure that never happens.
It's a bit sad, isn't it?
But otherwise, it's pretty cool that we can have a game that is on consoles, PCs, and now also mobile devices. And it really just looks a bit different, but it plays exactly the same on all 3 of these. And it's ridiculously popular as well.
Yeah, it's so popular.
I think it's overtaken PUBG in revenue, even though it's a free game.
Where do they get their revenue from?
Well, there's in-game sort of items that you can buy, cosmetic things. I don't really know, but they've made millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
Just goes to show there is a market for those things.
Yeah, and if you do it right, unlike EA with their Battlefront...
I know.
and making it sort of play to win and unlock, very vital things. But if you do it on a cosmetic level and you have people enjoy the game and play it enough, they will pay eventually.
So I heard that EA had actually cancelled a lot of the in-game transactions in Battlefront.
They have changed it a lot, but they lost so many players early on that they might have to wait until they bring out the 3rd one before it really kicks back up again.
Yeah. Well, it's their own fault.
Hopefully they've learnt a bit of a lesson there.
I don't think so.
You can be money grabbing, but you can't go ridiculous with it.
Yeah. It's a little bit sad, really, though, isn't it?
Did you see the US were trying to... I think it was the US, trying to bring in some sort of restrictions around, like, loot crate style things? Or not so much restrictions, actually, just like a warning on games that have in-app purchases to buy things that are based on luck. Because some people are saying that it equates a little bit to gambling.
Right, okay. I hadn't heard that, but it makes sense, I suppose. I mean, yeah, these purchases are so gross. Ugh.
Especially if it's the only way to do it, right? There's a lot of games that you can, like, buy or win this crate and it might give you something, or you buy it for a very small amount of money, but then you can actually unlock character X or gun X for X amount of money.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to, you could go, okay, I really want that thing and just buy it. Whereas EA were doing it in Battlefront. I don't know if that's changed now, but you can never actually guarantee that you're going to get anything, but you can buy a zillion loot crates to get some, to try and have the chance of getting it. which people were saying were a bit rough, really.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah.